Well, New York Liberty fans, WNBA fans, it is official. Brian was right about MVP. It comes home to New York for the first time ever. We're also going to talk about Game 2, New York Liberty get it done, and talk about some key stats for Game 3. All that and more coming up on this episode of Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans.
Gotta get up, gotta get up,
gotta get up. Hey, women's basketball fans, welcome to Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans, brought to you by Black Rosie Media and hosted by Erica L. Ayala. Hey, women's basketball fans, what a week it has been. Brian and I knew it was going to be contentious on the social media streets. We didn't even agree on MVP, but we talked about it. If you missed our last episode, please go check that out on Black Rosie Media, YouTube page. You can also find it most places where you listen to audio podcasts, because we break down our thinking for our respective picks. Brian and I shared that. We also spoke a little bit on behalf of Misha, but again, we'll have our full picks coming up. But I mean, as someone who did not have Breanna Stewart as my number one vote, but also as someone, Brian, who not only has been covering the New York Liberty for a really long time, but the whole reason that this podcast is called Gotta Get Up, the t-shirt toss song for the New York Liberty, is because it was my favorite part, my family's favorite part of going to New York Liberty games growing up when we were kids, me and my two sisters, and my mom, single mom, would take us to games. And I asked her, because I'm the only sports person in the family, and I asked her, Ma, why do we always go to these games? She's like, well, I knew it was important for you because you were really into sports, but it was also something that we could do as a family and that we could support other women doing things. And even if I didn't understand it and I didn't, enjoy it as much as you did, she said, I knew that it was important. And so all these years later, I have a podcast on my own platform named after the favorite part of my family's going to Madison Square Garden at the time and watching the New York Liberty. And as we were talking about MVP, it never once crossed my mind that the New York Liberty have never had an MVP, especially because people who've been following me know that the 2016 MVP race, I think, is, with all due respect to Nneka Ogwumike, wild to me that Tina Charles did not win MVP that year. But I didn't expect, Brian, to be so emotional with some of the things that the New York Liberty, who did a fantastic job, some of the care that they put into their first ever MVP. So before we get your take, though, Brian, let's play the video, right? The one and only Teresa Weatherspoon passing off such an important honor to the first ever New York Liberty MVP, the one and only Breanna Stewart.
From the black tops of Rucker Park to the hardwood in Barclays Center, everything on the court is earned, especially in New York.
Welcome, everyone, to the New York Liberty cornerstone franchise of the women's NBA.
In 1997, our story began with an opportunity to blaze a path. Today, it continues right here in Brooklyn with Stewart, New York City.
So today we officially welcome Breanna Stewart.
Hello, Brooklyn! A baller whose reputation precedes herself, opening her New York chapter with 45 points.
Breanna Stewart, a historic performance from Breanna Stewart.
Six-time Player of the Week, AP Player of the Year, bucket
to Stewart. Stewart's three.
After bucket.
Stewart dials it up, gets it to go.
After bucket.
Stewart fading.
Number 30 reminds us that when you dedicate yourself to the game and pour your soul into the process, there will always be love for you. She's showing the next generation of hoopers how it's done. How in this city, what you give is what you get. Nothing more, nothing less.
And Stewart doing it all.
That is what makes her special.
From the Bronx, Staten Island, Manhattan, Queens, and Brooklyn. New York, she's home. She's her. She's Breanna Stewart, the first WNBA MVP in New York Liberty history.
So that was the promo video that the Liberty put out. Brian, your thoughts?
Yeah, that word you mentioned, care, really stood out to me, and it feels like the franchise has really, I think they've always done it, but it feels even more intentional, just the way they just uplift and make sure that the past, like even though the Liberty's future is incredibly exciting, they make sure to never forget the past and the people who built this franchise and kept them afloat, even during the darkest years when things looked bleakest. I remember a while back when Jonathan Kolb won Executive of the Year, I talked with him, I asked him about how did you sort of keep yourself uplifted when things look so dire? And he mentioned, even in those dark days, it's like step one to where we actually eventually want to go. And I think for the franchise, just being able to withstand all the losses they took in 18-19, all the moves, all stinging defeats, just to be able to be at this point, I think is so valuable. And I think it speaks to a level of care and respect they have for the fans, that they give them their absolute best every day. They make sure that they highlight and uplift everyone who's worn a Liberty jersey. I feel like that part it's one of those things you get when you actually care and invest in the place that you call home. You build that community and you make it so that way people care and they have that bond. It's almost familial, I would say, in a sense, where it's like, okay, I know that when I'm coming to the game, I'm going to have a good time. I'm going to be in a safe environment. I'm going to be in a place where I feel appreciated, understood, seen, and respected. And I think just with the video itself, I think it was amazing. Like their social media team has been on top of it all season. The players have brought it on the court. Every aspect of the organization has matched that energy and brought it just as much. And I think that having a video like that really, because when I watched it the first time, I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. Like I was floored. And if you go on the team's Instagram page, we get the reaction of the players seeing it for the first time. Breanna even got emotional. She wiped away tears at the end. And I think having a player in particular like Spoon, who I think really epitomizes what New York basketball is about, being the one to sort of like be the spark to sort of highlight and acknowledge and salute Stewie's incredible year, I feel like was like a really nice extra touch on it, and it really made for a fantastic visual and I think an incredible viewing experience.
Yeah, and for viewers of Black Rosie Media, not something that's specific to Gotta Get Up, but it will also be a part of the podcast on audio. But I got to speak to Shayna, who is kind of the executive on the kind of business comms side. And we were talking about the all access. And I know we've talked about that on Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans. But to speak to the team, and again, from the marketing side, on the intentionality behind that, when they started kind of this concept and idea of bringing forth video, but especially giving fans an all access or like behind the scenes look, I'm really excited to share that conversation with y'all, because some of what you said is there, Brian. I mean, even me telling my story in the beginning, and you and I have talked about this. I think you were kind of asking me, it was either you or Jackie, or maybe all of us were talking. And I think you were kind of asking me, what is the difference between the franchise now and the franchise of yesteryear? And I said, the energy, the passion is not any different. it was displaced because of ownership in Westchester, but the passion was never gone. I remember when the move to Westchester County happened, I said, you know, it's a real travesty that an original franchise and the New York franchise is going to have to see the attendance go down. And that's, to me, it was very much because of circumstance. One, the venue could only hold, if it was busting at the seams, 4,000. But also, you know, that's an investment, an additional investment to go from New York City, any of the 5 boroughs, all the way up to White Plains. I just so happened to be working in White Plains at the time, so I was doing a reverse commute. But that was real investment. And even then, fans, diehard fans who'd been going to Madison Square Garden showed up. And more would have come if there were room for them. So when people, you know, when the franchise came to Brooklyn, when they came to Barclays, even honestly, this season, when they've been at Barclays and they keep, you know, the upper bowl closed off, that's not because there's not fans that will show up. Those are decisions that are made outside of the fans. The fans have always showed up. They have always showed out and will always show love for, like you said, Teaspoon and the OGs. Sue Wicks still comes to games. Kim Hampton, as a player and now even well into her retirement, still comes back. She used to be an anthem singer a lot of times at games back in the day, even when she was still active on the roster. So, I mean, there's just so much history. And again, you'll have to see that clip when I'm talking to Shayna, but there was a very conscious effort to carry the most important parts as much as possible of that history, and to also let it grow and evolve as there's a new venue, new ownership, and new players. And I think it's also interesting coming off of that documentary, which was, you know, about the New York Liberty titled Unfinished Business, that I guess it premiered about 2 years ago, and I think went live with a public, I guess, debut this season. But, you know, just putting all of those pieces together, my story, looking at covering the team for the last handful of years, from MSG to White Plains to Barclays, and even now being physically, geographically distanced from it, but still involved. I mean, it's just really special. It's special what's happening. And like I said, we talked about it last episode. We've talked about it before. I wasn't even all in on Stewie. She wasn't my number 1 pick for MVP. And to be clear, because I just want to say on social media, this is getting twisted. Just because I didn't put Stewie as 1, it obviously doesn't mean I don't think she's deserving. And it was hard for me to put Asia Wilson at 3, but you have to rank the players. And I think that was really difficult. And the last thing I'll say before we move on, because we are going to talk about the Connecticut Sun, is I'm heartbroken for Alyssa Thomas. I'm heartbroken for Alyssa Thomas, because apparently I wasn't the only one that put her at first. But what it appears has happened is that the voters, the 60 voters, were split between where they wanted to settle Asia and Stewie. And because of that, AT didn't get as many second place votes, and her weighted score was not quite enough for MVP. And that hurts. Again, I'm a Liberty fan. I grew up a Liberty fan. I have a Liberty podcast, but I think we can hold space to say that Asia Wilson, I mean, is having a fantastic playoffs. That's for damn sure, and had a fantastic season. And damn, this is the closest that AT has ever been. And the fact that she still couldn't get it, my heart hurts for her. But I'll let you close us out on MVP talk, or the MVP unveiling, since you were there when Stewie got the official and brand new. They changed it up a little, so she's got a brand new look to her award. But final thoughts on that before we get into this game 2.
Yes. I just want to echo the salute you gave to Alyssa Thomas and Asia Wilson. I could tell that, you know, it meant a lot for them to be so close to getting it. And I think the fact that their play was so incredible this season, I was saying to myself, there was literally no way you could have gone wrong with either one of them. I guess in a perfect world, you would have just been like, "Oh, hey, you all got it." But
not a perfect world for me. This is not Mean Girls. No, go ahead.
It's like you take the new trophy, break off one arm, break off one leg. Each person gets a piece, and then we all head out, and then there's no drama. But I would say that also they were incredible, and I think their game and their character and their leadership and their excellence has been appreciated by fans across the league and by players themselves. Even during Stewie's during her speech last night, she made sure to salute both of them specifically and talked about how incredible they were. So I think it's great that even in her moment, she still made time to uplift her two rivals for the award, and I thought that was really excellent. And I guess now to transition over to the presentation itself, we had a special guest running around throughout the speech, which was really beautiful. Like, we were all in there watching Ruby. She's like, oh wow, she's about to come to the stage. And then the commissioner was with her for a little bit. Clara Tsai was there, Kia Clark was there. It was really, we talked at the beginning about the Liberty really making things feel like a special event and really putting the players on that pedestal that they deserve. I think the fact that they had her family out there, the coaches were there, the players were there for her. It felt like that's the way you run and do a presentation. That's how you, there she is. That's how you sort of have like a first class event where you make the players and their families feel welcome, feel appreciated, feel cared for and respected. And I think that it's great that the players are getting this now. It feels very special. Like, the game is in such a great space, and I think it's awesome that the folks who have the most influence and the biggest resources are putting it in to really highlight and amplify that. Like, the game of basketball has so many awesome players in it, and I think when you promote players, you put them in positions where they can be seen by as many people as possible. You create those welcome, positive environments. It shows in the play, and I think that having a situation like this was really beautiful and awesome. So I would say 2 thumbs up to the entire organization for how they, from the video to the presentation, the speech itself, the on-court during the game, the post stuff after. It felt very much the exact way a top tier best market in the league should operate. And I think that they deserve credit for meeting this moment in such a fantastic way.
Applause to everyone involved. I'm so glad you were able to be there. I think also it was cool they had that video. So Derek Jeter was there, Jason Sudeikis. I thought what Gino said was also really telling because, and we've talked about this with Misha, but Breanna Stewart has won at every single level. Not just like won, but like dominated at every single level. And I loved what you said when you took us back to her signing in free agency, and that coming to New York was a way to get better, right? To just continue to evolve. And I mean, that's just fantastic when you meet this organization that, like you said, in the now is trying to be top tier, but also carries this weight, this historic, all of the history, teaspoon. And, that was the New York Liberty. They weren't lovable losers early because they were right there, just on the cusp, right there, neck and neck with the Houston Comets, but just couldn't get over the hump. And that's what the whole unfinished business is. So I think Stewie winning MVP for a lot of people, it's like a balm. For some of those tougher times and for times where you had almost like an AT kind of scenario where you had an exciting and electric, a humble and hardworking New York Liberty team just never quite get over the hump. So when I say that I have love and respect and my heart aches for AT in particular, I mean it because I'm one of those New York Liberty fans. But
yes, I also love the commentary sheet. So one of the reporters asked her about how she's changed from the first MVP in 2018 to now, and she talked a lot about the recovery from the Achilles tear in 19, and also being a working mom, and expecting mom to be this fall. I thought those comments were really poignant, and I think just in thinking about the inclusivity piece, we always talk about, like, you want to make sure you create room for moms who have their responsibilities and pressures that they do, to be able to be in a work environment where they can be their very best, have people who are behind them and supporting them and uplifting them, creating those conditions for not just mom, but for her partner, her little ones, and their families as well too. So I think just listening to her talk about that, it was really poignant. And also when she mentioned that she wanted to really do things for her daughter, so Ruby can be if she wants to be a basketball player, she can have that avenue, or if she wants to go in a different direction, that option is available as well too. So I think just in thinking about her speech, that inclusivity point really sort of stood out to me while I was in the room. Just always making sure that every aspect of you is recognized in the moment, aside from just like the great work that you do on the court, just the work and just what you bring into the space as a person outside of it matters just as much too. And I thought it was great that she highlighted that.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up before we close and switch gears, because again, that's, I'm older now, and so I'm reflecting, but that's what my mom was saying. Like, she didn't need to be in love with basketball. She didn't need all of her daughters to be in love with basketball, but what she did need as a single mom was a place where her family could be exactly who they are. And she found that at Liberty Games. So I think it's really cool for you to bring that up and for Stewie to mention that, because I'm not a parent. I was the oldest child of a single parent household, but I'm not a parent. I don't have my own children. But I think that's really important for families to know, as you said, like they can be accepted, for people to know that they can be accepted. And the WNBA, for most of its tenure, but always the New York Liberty has been that beacon. And that really goes back to someone that we mentioned earlier, and that's Sue Wicks, especially for the LGBTQ community. So we could go on, and whenever the season ends for the New York Liberty, we might just do that. So maybe we'll do a live stream or something where fans can weigh in as well. But Brian, we do get to talk about game 2. You were at game 2, and it seems like you weren't the only one. We mentioned that, or we were talking about it, I think, when we were both in Brooklyn. I was like, yo, Swiss is here, where's Alicia? Well, she showed up for game 2. She showed up for game 2. So, it was a New York Liberty win. Spoiler alert, the New York Liberty did get that win against Connecticut, and they did it by focusing on some of the things that we talked about. So it was an 84-77 win. We're not going to talk about the second series, but Vegas is leading that series. I just want to put out there, because I'm curious if this becomes a thing later. But the Liberty won with 84 points over the Connecticut Sun. Dallas lost and had the same score line, the same amount of points as the New York Liberty. So just something to keep in mind. Dallas is fighting for their lives. They have to, obviously, their next game is a must win, but they have a large hill to climb. But it's not for lack of effort. But again, we are going to keep it to the New York Liberty just because we spent so much time, as was absolutely appropriate, on MVP. But Brian, let's get your thoughts. You were in the building, a raucous Brooklyn crowd that was ready to celebrate their MVP and also will their team to a much better performance. How'd Brooklyn do?
Well, the crowd sold out, 10,000 plus, A+ crowd. And on the game itself, something that they did, which surprised the heck out of me, was that they played way more zone than I've seen them play in 2 years.
Yes, that was crazy.
I was sitting there. I was sitting there. They got down by 12, and I was like, wait a minute, why are they in the zone? And then I was like, they're still doing it. still doing it. Fourth quarter, they are still in this zone, and it worked. They sprung a few leaks on occasion, which they have to clean up, but by and large, that thing worked to perfection. Like the Sun, in the last episode, we mentioned specifically if can the Sun make enough threes to survive. If they can, the math for you is really bad. But if they can't, and if you're able to sort of get them off that 3-point line, contest heavily, make things hard for them, you are in a much better place, and the Liberty were. And I think especially Connecticut, I think something we'll have to watch for, we'll probably get to in game 3, is that their depth is starting to take a little bit of a situation with the depth, because Letitia Heidemann had to leave out early because she was under the weather.
Yeah, she grew up, right?
Yeah, threw up. She played like 3 minutes after half, but then Stephanie White left her on the bench the rest of the night and let Ty Harris run things. Dejanay Carrington, I believe, is still less than 100% and didn't play at all in game 2. So her status is going to be massive going forward, and especially on a night where you weren't able to get the volume of shooting success that Beck Allen had in game 1 because of foul trouble. One thing that the Liberty did this time is that when she got those fouls, they went after her in a way that I haven't seen done in a while. Like Ionescu went first, but Ionescu went for her every time. When she got switched on the Stewie, get it to the MVP in the low block, you get to work. And they were deliberate about that. They also got to the basket a ton more. And then in game 1, Sabrina found those driving angles that weren't there. And because even in game 1, she was 4 for 14 overall, but 4 for 8 from downtown. And usually when you make 4 threes in the game, you're gonna win if you do everything else well enough. And she didn't. So even though the overall field goal percentage wasn't there, that's still the best 3-point shooter walking on the Eastern Hemisphere. So you gotta keep yourself together. And you got to make sure if she's out there, you got to go chase her down. And then with that comes those driving lanes. You've mentioned this specifically. She's a lot stronger than she looks. Like she can take bumps, she can take contact, and she can finish. And she got 10 free throws on the night, went perfect 10 for 10, had a lot of success in the painted area, which is exactly what you want on nights when your threes aren't really there. So having that option was critical. JJ started off massive again. Just her inside presence really forces the Sun to get. She hit.
She was juking like, oh man, it was great to see because, and I mean, there's so many things that you said that I want to circle back to, but I knew you were going to get to JJ, and I just wanted to make sure, like, I really locked in on how she was using her body. JJ's good for I mean, we've talked about it before too. You know that elbow gonna pop. If JJ got the ball and she's got her back to the rim, you know that elbow's popping out. But what she did is she added more movement, and she was much more fluid and less predictable. From my opinion in watching the game, because I wasn't there with you in Brooklyn, but from watching the game, that really stood out to me. And it doesn't seem like a big deal, but it kind of was a big deal because JJ really, we know she can be dominant in the paint, but she was in control.
Yep, and there was one play that really stood out. They doubled her on the left block. I think that it was a triple, in fact. She went away from it, swung a pass to Laney in the corner for 3 points. And JJ, even when she got the pass up, if you go back and watch it, she's like jumping on the court in excitement because she knows she made a great play. And then when Lady made that 3, it's like, that's how you play, and that's a full accounting of her awesome skills. Having a big who can handle pressure like that, be a great passer, be a great connector, be that great post presence, and someone who's unselfish, has great vision, and can always make the right basketball play. That is a gold mine to have as a lead player. And the fact that she's able to have a game like that was fantastic. And just to sort of circle back to the defensive point from up top, another night where her length made the paint tough for AT. Like the Liberty, it feels like the Liberty are like they are like perfectly situated to have enough length, athleticism, size, speed, and toughness to take that, to take these bumps, take those hits, really make things hard for AT, and really sort of like make her be more of a distributor than that downhill menace that she is when she's on a roll. So having someone like JJ who can swallow those hits, get back up, keep going, is gonna keep at it. Even though sometimes the fouls may come from like an over aggressiveness or bad luck indication, she's always gonna be looking to make those plays, and having that against a player like Thomas, who was 40 minutes every night. Like, you're never going to get a possession off when AT's on the court. Having players who can stand in and take those bumps, I think, is massive.
Yup. The word girth has been used a lot on the broadcast, which I think I even tweeted. I was like, do they have a bet to use this word? I mean, it's not wrong, but it's also just like, of all the words. But it's, it's like you said, size and grit. And what do we know about AT? Everyone calls her the engine. If you have a diesel engine, the only thing that's stopping that is like a titanium wall. And it just so happens that AT used to play with one, and now she's got to play against it in JJ. Because when JJ is steady, when JJ is composed, when JJ, like you said, even with that pass on the triple team, is feeling the flow, that's why she's been an MVP in the league.
Yep.
Just so y'all know.
Yep.
Okay, so I want to take you back, though, to our last conversation. And it's also been something that got picked up in broader media, because Sandy Brondello, and we've had this conversation earlier in the season, she makes no bones. She will cut to the dang chase and said it was the worst game one, that she's seen the Liberty play. So what was the conversation coming in to the game, and what were Sandy Brondello and company saying after the performance in game 2?
Yeah, one of the things Sandy mentioned was that just not trying to sort of like make home run plays and not sort of feel like, oh, the first shot is there, do it in isolation. Just continue doing what you're supposed to do. Just trust what you're doing, run the offense, keep the ball moving side to side, find those avenues, clean up on the glass, like actually put a body on people, complete those possessions so you can get out and run, get that crowd really behind you. So they were able to do that successfully. And also in post game, we were talking to Benash and Laney and little JJ, who made a guest appearance with us in the scrum section. So she was talking with us about how the team was really able to just sort of keep their offensive rhythm going, find those driving lanes, really sort of like exploit those avenues that came open. And for Laney in particular, I want to see if I can stay on her for a little bit, because I went back to watch the shot attempts she had in game 1. A lot of them came at the rim where she usually makes them. Like, she had a couple layups that Venice made some great passes on that Laney got at the rim, but they just rimmed out, were just a little bit too hard, things like that. And she was able to keep that consistency up tonight, but had a lot more success. And I think the 3-point shooting, especially after half, really opened things up for the Liberty. I think her ability and I think her communication and leadership on the defense, especially when they broke out into the zone, I thought that was really fantastic, because you could see on plays she's pointing Ionescu here, she's pointing Sloot there, keeping everything moving well with Stewie and JJ in the back line ready to step up and help out as well too. So I think her leadership really shined through on both sides of the ball last night. And I think just having a player who I think has the respect of all her teammates, the trust everyone has in each other, to know that, oh, wow, we haven't, so Ionescu said to herself, we haven't done zone in God knows how long. And they broke it out on the fly, down 12 in a game you got to have, because
have to have it.
Because winning 3 straight against the Sun is a tough proposition that I would not want to try myself if I had the option. So being able to pull that off out of nowhere, I thought was really amazing work by all the starters. And I think they deserve a lot of props for just being able to keep their composure, figure it out, and get on the go.
I love all of what you just said, because if you contain that, that's what I felt like was missing from game 1. I mean, we were messaging and then obviously talked about it on the podcast, where it was just like too much left in the tank, way too much left in the tank. lack of coordination, like you said, not working through effectively. I'm paraphrasing what you were saying, but looking for ISO, looking for first shot, not working through the shot clock. Those are things that we have not seen from the New York Liberty in a really long time. So it was a little bit trippy, quite honestly, to watch game one and see them fall back into, not just fall back into things that they were doing early on, but even doing some things that I don't even know. I can only say it's uncharacteristic because we'd never seen it before, not to be hyperbolic, but it was just like an absence from everything they had worked so hard to build. But they got it together in game two, but not without a fight from Connecticut. Listen, because Tip Hayes, Tiffany, you can't guard me, Hayes came through. And, I know you talked about the bench, Beck Allen, foul trouble, you nailed it. Natisha Heidemann, just, you hate to hear when someone upchucks on the bench and then they can't come back. So, don't know what happened there. But, Hayes coming through for this Connecticut team. And once again, I have to show the lead tracker because Connecticut made it tough in the middle of this game and New York Liberty had to grab it back. I know you talked about that and how the Liberty have been able to accelerate later in games as they've gotten later into the regular season, and they were able to do it again. Another thing that we talked about on our last podcast, and you alluded to it earlier, fast break points. What was it? 7-0, right? 7-0 in game one. Fast break points, 5 for Connecticut, 16 for the New York Liberty. I think that some of these numbers we like to see. The lead changes, though, were right there, neck and neck. Biggest lead actually was for the Connecticut Sun, a 12-point lead. The New York Liberty obviously able to extend that to their own 10-point lead. Game was tied 3 times. Lead changes overall 4. Another thing, though, because I don't like turnovers, and I like the Liberty to be under at 10 and under. They're not usually at 10 and under. 14, a little bit high for me in a semifinal game, but Connecticut had 10. And I think another thing that we have to take a look at is bench productivity. You kind of mentioned Connecticut and their bench, they had some issues, but the New York Liberty have not really been utilizing their bench. And that's something that, Brian, we have been asking Sandy Brondello about all season. What has she told us? First, I had to start with my starters, then I can go to my reserves. But it seems as we are getting a little bit deeper into the playoffs that we're not really even seeing the reserves have to step up. I want to ask you, is that something that you think could potentially be a problem for the New York Liberty, whether it's this series, and if they survive this series, can it be something difficult if they run across Vegas again, which is looking likely, or even Dallas?
Yeah, one thing I was thinking about it last night because that was the last question Sandy got about the bench, and I feel like Sandy wanted to say, I won the game. Like my starters, like my best 5 rolled out there. What do you want me to say to you right now? She kind of got that, but I was thinking about it throughout the day, and like you mentioned, they wanted to build the chemistry of the starters first, and that part I think was really essential because I think ultimately their season is going to come down to their starting 5, and they're going to be the ones who either sink or swim. And I always liken it to like in baseball where you're deep in the postseason and your number 1 starter is out there. And it's like, and if it's in like May or June, you may not ride them for like 125 pitches because it's like, it's June, we got a long way to go. But now that we're in, the highest of stakes, it's like, okay, can you, like, is it possible for me to climb on the shoulders? I got to climb on the shoulders. Can you give me 9 innings? And I think the answer is yes. And I think especially, Stewie plays like 39, like she gets like a couple, like 45 seconds, like in between the end of the third quarter and that break to start the fourth is usually like her rest period these days. So there's that. JJ, her minutes are in the upper 30s as well too, and she's fully at peak capacity from where she was at the beginning of the year. Ionescu's always in the move. She's always in great shape. Lainey is able to really do what she does. Sloot, I think, is where they manage her minutes a little bit more, which is where we see KT and some splashes of Johannes on occasion these days. But by and large, I think throughout the seasons, you always want to make sure, okay, we got all our keys down pat. So we know that when it's time, I can just go to it and not even have to worry about it. And just thinking about that chemistry piece a little bit more, think back to the end of game 2, where JJ and Stewie pulled off that X play off the missed free throw and nailed it to perfection. That's where the chemistry comes in, the nonverbal communication, just knowing, okay, this is what's going to happen. We're locked in. We got it. Just having that baked in, especially from your 5 best players, is so essential. And I think that for a team as good as Connecticut, because their top 2 don't sit either. Like, Dewana Bonner sits for like maybe 30 seconds, and it's like, oh, someone's in for Dewana Bonner. I look down on my phone for a second or type something, and it's, Dewana Bonner's checking back in. That was fast. So it's like, it's that time. And I think all the players to understand that, if I have to pitch a complete game tonight, that's what it calls for. I'm gonna do my best, and then we'll live with it.
I mean, that's very real. And what do we know about the WNBA playoffs? Is that there is going to be a game. It's not going to be every game, and it might not be the same player every game, but there's going to be a game where there's going to have to be a role player, an X factor player that does something. And it's not always offensively, people, because see, now I'm getting upset. When you talk about value, you can't only talk about raw offensive numbers, raw defensive numbers. If we had stats for 50-50 balls won, how many times does someone tie someone up? How many times, what was something else, right, that we were talking about? Sandy Brondello saying that she wants her teams to get more tips, those kinds of things. Those things they seem small, but they're massive when the margin of error is very slight. And also the talent is so equally matched, like, I don't know, in a semifinals. So I think that is something that I'm not concerned about it, but I'm keeping an eye on it. And I just want to make sure, and this is where I think the question, I haven't listened to all of the post-game media, so I need to go back and listen to that. But the question, in theory, it sounds to me like could be valid, because you at least want your reserve players to be ready. My opinion, though, is that Sandy Brondello has done pretty well to get everyone that's available to her some touches. And now that's just the part of being a bench player, is that you don't always know when your touches are going to come. Sometimes you got to rock with, 2-3 minutes. Sometimes you got to put in 16, depending on who you are, what the situation is. And that's your role. That's what you have to be ready for. Is it necessarily quote unquote fair? I mean, I don't even know how to answer that question. It is what it is. And you go in knowing what that role is going to be. At least with the New York Liberty, I feel like the bench and the starters are pretty clear cut. There's other times where maybe it's a little more fluid, but I think it's pretty clear cut on the New York Liberty roster. So I think my eye test tells me that the bench players have gotten enough touches in theory, but also it's after a certain point, it's a young bench. So how far into the bench do you need to go? Because KT, she's not been on winning teams, but she's been around long enough. Yep. Obviously, we know that Steph Dolson has a championship. But there's no more Epiphany.
Yeah.
So you don't have that. We're not in a year where it's Alasia Clarendon. So the experience expires really early on the New York Liberty, even including their bench. So just something to think about. Am I concerned about it? No. Could I see it being a factor? Yes.
Yeah, and I guess to that point, Marine has the international experience of like big games, but not the WNBA side. So right. and she struggled a little bit throughout the postseason so far, and she is that role player who, hey, Ask Becky Hammond. Marina just come in there, hit you with 6 threes and nowhere. And it's like, wait a minute. She just like,
I ain't got defense for that.
yeah, like, what do you want me to do about this? So she's someone
Yeah.
to keep an eye on when it comes to that. So I think that's something to really
Yeah,
keep.
and that's a good point. But what do we also know about Marine Johannes is that how do I want to say this? I mean, to just put it bluntly, sometimes it's not her skill, but it's her mentality. It's her confidence that needs massaging. And how do you do that if you're not getting minutes? How do you do that if you're not seeing shots in a game go in? It's hard. It's not impossible, but it is hard.
Yeah. And I think,
So,
and I think the team has always tried to uplift her, and they always try to like really encourage her to sort of like keep that confidence up and always include her. Just a quick diversion. If you guys go and look at some of the social media videos after the players went to take photos with Alicia Keys, Marine tried to run off and stuff. I was like, come here. And they all just like pushed her to go take a photo with Alicia Keys, which I thought was adorable. And I think also just tying back a little bit more to what we said up top, just like everyone's there for each other. So even if you're not getting the minutes and things that you're used to from the regular season, they know that, okay, we're not down on you. We still care.
Right.
We still support you. When it's your time, get in there, do what you do, and trust that you can make something happen. And I think that Marine is a player where when she gets in and she takes like one of those like incredible threes and then goes in, it's like, okay, it's Marine time. Let's get it. So I think having that confidence and that support from people like Dolson and everyone else on the team, I think is always valuable. So even when you're not getting the heavy minutes that you'd like or think you could get or contribute to on a particular night, just know that even when you do get in, they got you covered.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I mean, we talked a lot about this. It's kind of perhaps maybe one of my key factors, but let's talk about cut and dry statistics. What are some key stats that you're looking for game 3? Are there some that you're carrying over that you wanted to see in game 2? Are there other ones that we didn't talk about on our last show? Brian, you get first crack at
Sure.
it.
One thing I think that the Liberty did a lot better of in game 2 is that they kept the Sun off the offensive boards. I think in game 1 they had about like 14. In game 2 they had about like 6, and that's massive. And preventing those extra possessions gets you out on the run, saves your energy, so you're not having to battle against an elite defense in the half court every single time down. That part matters a lot. So if they're able to win the glass again, that's going to be huge for this team. And something else that I want to keep an eye on is the 3-point shooting. They started to sort of like get some of those hits after halftime. I want to say they went 7 for 13, something like that after the break. So if they're able to refine their 3-point shot, that's going to be incredible. And they're going to need to make sure that, because I feel like this is a team that loves to like silence road crowds. Like teams will try to go on big runs, and then all of a sudden it's, oh look, here's a Sabrina 3. Let everybody on mute. So we got to make sure.
Not everybody on mute. Come on, Houston, get it together. Get it together.
Yeah, so having the ability to knock down those clutch baskets, especially from deep, is critical. And if the group has found that 3-point shot after not having it in game 1 and throughout the first half of game 2, that changes, I think, everything on how Connecticut tries to defend them. That opens up even more in the painted area for Jones to work one-on-one without any help coming in. I feel like it creates so many good avenues for the Liberty, and if they've got it going early, it puts a lot of pressure on the Sun to try to keep up.
I agree with a lot of what you said. I'm never gonna disagree if we're talking defense and especially rebounding. I think that's really critical. We talked about it a little bit. We haven't really talked a lot about Vandersloot on this episode, but I do think that Courtney Vandersloot, we saw more of her on the offensive side in game 2. And so that's another thing that I'm going to be looking out for. I love that you mentioned that Sabrina Ionescu was also, I guess, kind of, she was not only facilitating, but also being a self-starter and trying to create more by slashing and cutting and driving. So I am looking for that, generally speaking, but I've mentioned it a time or two. I think it's still true. It didn't ring true in the Washington series, but that was a 3-game series. This is a 5-game series, and should the Liberty advance, it's another 5-game series in the finals. I do still think that you need Courtney Vandersloot to help keep the opponent honest by going off for, I mean, I'd love to see her get a solid 20, 22 points in one playoff game, because I think that helps. It reminds me of what year was that where Sue Bird had to just go lights out? Of course, we know Sue Bird can shoot.
I want to say it was 18, right?
Something like that, because it was the championship right before the bubble, but 18 or 19, I guess.
Yeah,
but
the series. Mask, yeah.
Mask Sue, part 2, because she did that early in her career as well. But and that was what was necessary. We know Sue Bird can shoot, but she didn't always, quote unquote, have to shoot. She needed to shoot. That was against Phoenix, right? And DT. She needed to shoot to win that series, to win that game. I don't know, like, just the vibes, the auntie vibes are telling me that it might come down to that. And of course, we know Sabrina can shoot. We know Marine can shoot. We know, like, this is a team. I don't think there's anyone on the Liberty, quite honestly, that's not capable of shooting at a high clip. And you just need someone like Courtney Vandersloot because of her position and the role that she plays. If you have someone who's usually has the ball in their hand, that's also going to keep you honest by their shooting, by their driving, it just makes everything more difficult. So that's something that I'm keeping an eye on. But all right, we'll close this episode out. We do our fun little predictions. New York Liberty or Connecticut Sun. You get to pick. So you pick your team. Let us know what team you're picking and tell us this team will win game 3 if insert your prediction.
All right. I'll start with Connecticut. I'll say the Connecticut Sun will win if the Wanna Bonner has 25 or more points.
Ooh. Okay. I think that's fair.
Yeah.
And for New York, what are you thinking?
And for New York, the Liberty will win if Jonquel Jones has another double-double.
I like it. I'm going to say the Connecticut Sun win game 3 if they keep the Liberty under 78 points. And they can do it.
Mm-hmm.
They can do that's like average for them. That's not average for the Liberty, but that's about degular for the Connecticut Sun. I should say I'm going by eyeball test. I don't have the actual numbers in front of me, but just over time, like historically, that feels about the sweet spot. If you can get into the 80s, and certainly obviously, like if you get 90s above, like you got that thing locked, against the Connecticut Sun. But if they hold you, and so then I guess kind of going off of what I said, I don't know that it doesn't necessarily have to be game 3, but for consistency's sake, the New York Liberty win if Courtney Vandersloot has a double-double.
I like that. Yeah, and I love that Sloot was really able to start looking for her shot more and really punish the Sun when they left her open, and just being able to take those mid-range jumpers, and even deep in the shot clock, just being able to like pump fake to get 0-0 away from her in the corner, take that pull-up mid-range jumper with confidence and trust that it's going to go in. That part is so valuable, and it makes it so that way. I think because like the great thing about the Liberty is that you can't hide anybody. Like you can't, if you have a weak opponent against them, they're going to find you and they will punish you every single time down. You got somebody you trying to hide who's a foul trouble? Not against this team. You better get them on the court or just pray that New York starts listen. Because either way,
It's true. It's true. And I love what you said earlier in the episode about Beck Allen. What I was thinking about is I love the movie A League of Their Own, and it reminded me of when Dottie Hinson is pitching or is catching, and her sister Kit Keller is up, and she goes straight to her pitcher. She's like, high fastballs, can't hit them, can't lay off them. And in my mind, like you were like, yeah, they just were going after Beck Allen. I was like, yo, Sandy Brondello on the bench, like, sweep the leg. Like, no, because as much as, and I mean, I gloated about Beck Allen so much, and I do think she has made so many strides. Like, if you've really watched her game, she's made so many strides to be not only less of a liability defensively, but even to be a defensive asset. And similarly to what I've said about JJ, she does have certain tendencies. Beck is a little bouncy, I guess is the best way I can put it. She's always on the balls of her feet. She's always bouncing around. And because she's long, sometimes her timing, it seems like, is just a hair off, and she'll get caught on something that's not what I would call an egregious call, but just her movement and the way she's a little shifty and a little bouncy. And sometimes she relies on her wingspan to cover up mistakes that maybe she's not sliding in the right position with her feet. She'll get caught. And if you can expose that, again, do I think Sabrina has the quickest first step? I've been on the record. No, I do not. And like you have said, I do think she's very powerful. And so if she gets enough space with that first step, because it's serviceable. It's not the quickest, but it's serviceable. And I think it's even gotten quicker since I keep saying it. She'd be like, all right, Erica, I'm going to shut you up. But, if she gets in strong, a player like a Beck Allen can have difficulty with that, because Sabrina is not shifty in the same way or slippery, like I say with Sloot, but she's deceptively strong. And quick and nimble, and she can work her way through. So yeah, I thought I loved that you said that, because in my head, she was like, can't hit them, can't lay off them. Like, oh man. Well, Brian, it's always great to chop it up with you. Thank you for just being here, virtually anyway, to help me work through all my feels on that video. And the first ever WNBA MVP from the New York Liberty, Breanna Stewart. Congratulations to her. Great job, Shayna, and the rest of the New York Liberty crew on the videos and all of the shout outs and the tributes, everything that you've been doing this year. But Brian, let the folks know where they can find you and what you have coming up, including maybe sounds like a road trip to Uncasville coming up soon.
Yep. The plan is I'm going to head up to Uncasville for Game 4 Sunday afternoon, 3 o'clock Eastern time on ABC for everybody out there. On the site, Ella, one of our new writers, Ella Morrissey, has analysis of each of the games and looking ahead to the next game. So keep on the eye for that. I'm on Twitter at BusyXB, so you can find me. Well, not it's called whatever now, not Twitter anymore. But find me out there, and I will say hello. So yeah, keep on the lookout for that. I know we got a lot of great stuff coming up, so I'm excited to see how the rest of this journey goes.
Absolutely. I'm excited for you that you get to continue to cover the team and make your trek up to Mohegan Sun. I'm glad you mentioned social media, because I've been locked out of my Twitter X account for a minute, which is crazy. I'm hella tight. So you definitely have to make sure, and I'll have to change this for our next episode, but follow at Black Rosie Media on all platforms. But you can also follow Lindsay on Threads and on IG if you can't, if you don't want to rock with Black Rosie, but also you should rock with Black Rosie. This is Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans, brought to you by Black Rosie Media. And as I mentioned, I got to speak to Shayna particularly about the behind the scenes all access series that the New York Liberty have been offering. I think it fits into that tribute video. So make sure you check that out. That will be up before Game 4 in Uncasville. All right. For Brian, my name is Erica. This is Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans. We will catch you after the next game on the next episode. But like I said, make sure you are following Black Rosie Media and subscribe on our YouTube channel so you get all the bonus episodes and material, including that look at the video series that the New York Liberty has been putting together. All right, from Brooklyn for Brian and out here on the West Coast in Seattle. Good night, everyone. We'll catch you on the next episode.